Just give me the high sign when you're ready. This is exciting, isn't it? Ready? Well, good evening, everybody. I'm David Gordon. I'm the Executive Director of KEET-TV, and it's really good to see everybody here tonight, back out in our community with our live production van and everybody here for this event tonight. It's really great to be here. First of all, tonight, KEET wants to thank the Wiyot people on whose traditional lands this event is taking place. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to present the educational work that's at the heart of this event. Well, tonight is the world premiere of our newest documentary, and it's called Seeing the Signs. And tonight, the film and the panel discussion are going to be streamed live, and we're going to be recording it as well for a later broadcast. I want to make sure that I thank our great partners for this project, Nami, Humboldt, and Two Feathers Native American Family Services. Without them, this film literally could not have been made. We want to thank also Twin Cities PBS in Minneapolis for funding this project, and we want to thank you, our viewers, and our supporters, because without you, nothing gets done at KEET, so thank you very much. I especially want to thank our producer, Linda Stansberry, as well as our editor, David Thompson, for the work that they did on this documentary. The film will present some powerful and thought-provoking stories, and those stories needed to be told. So I'm glad that we have the opportunity to share that with you tonight. So now I'm pleased to introduce the producer of Seeing the Signs, Linda Stansberry.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. I want to start off by just a little bit of housekeeping. We do have a survey on the table over there that we hope you will take after the film. We're going to have a short break to eat and take the survey, and then we'll begin our panel. I would like to begin by saying that this is a topic of deep resonance with me as a person and as someone who has lost many people in my own life and my community to suicide. It is a sad topic much of the time, so I want to start by taking a deep breath and just feeling my stomach and inviting you guys to do that with me so we can prepare ourselves. Thank you. So thank you again to KEET for inviting me to take part in this project. I want to thank our behind-the-scenes team back there, over there, to David, to Katie, to David Thompson, our editor and director of photography, to Heather, and to Sam. You guys are wonderful. Thank you to the many experts who contributed their time and expertise on this topic, and who continue to do so much good work in our community. And my biggest thank you to the families whose stories are featured in this film. Stacy, Nicole, and Frankie, you guys invited me into your homes and shared stories of one of the most difficult experiences a person can go through. And I am so impressed with your courage and just really so honored that you let me into your life. So I appreciate you. The final thing that I want to say is that although this is a topic that is heavy and it is sad, we as a community are writing a new story about this really important health issue. You know, we are continuing a conversation that helps destigmatize suicide, that opens conversations, that gives us all new tools to uplift and help people in our community and our lives. So Ultimately, this is not a sad story. This is a story of healing and triumph for our community. And I am so excited to get this started. So here we go. Let's get to work. Enjoy the film.
Yeah, people want suicide grief to follow a pattern or follow a... You go through the 12 steps of grief in an hour, every day. So, like, somebody told me that the grief from suicide is, oh, well, it's closer to grief from homicide. And I'm like, no, because then there isn't anybody you can even be mad at. You know, I mean, it's not the healthiest, but at least then you have somebody that you can shake a fist at in the night, you know, kind of a thing. But it's like, when it's your loved one, what the hell are you gonna do? You know, you can't be mad at them. So, I don't know. Anyways.
You know, Humboldt County is roughly a 6-hour drive from San Francisco, right on the beautiful Pacific Ocean coastline. It takes a while to get from one place to another. That's all windy roads to get to Hoopa, windy roads with often road construction to get to Orleans, to get to Klamath. This is just an example of, I think, the open space, the ruralness of Humboldt County, and it's isolated from any major city. I think the closest city, bigger city, is Redding, which is a 3.5-hour drive from McKinleyville, or Santa Rosa, 4.5-hour drive, so remote.
My name is Frankie. I'm 18 years old. I live in Humboldt County in California.
She was my partner. I was a stay-at-home mom until I divorced when she was about 6. And we did everything together. And even after divorcing, we'd pack up in our van and we were all over the county. She was my shadow and the love of my life and the bane of my existence all rolled into one, because that's what kids are. Before middle school, she was very brave. She was pretty outspoken. She was independent and funny, smart, and quick. She's quick on her feet. There was never a dull moment. We always had a great time.
Like, even though she never told me how much we were struggling financially, I could tell. Like, we went from living in a 2-bedroom house to living in this tiny room. There was no heat, no running water, all that fun stuff. No separate rooms, just maybe about like as big as the room we're in right now. That was where we lived. I felt like very alone. Felt like no matter what I did, I felt like I always stood out. I could never fit in. And that all took a big toll on me. I felt like, well, if I'm not gonna be good enough, then why bother like continuing? I know no matter what I do, I'll never be able to prove myself, so why even try?
I definitely started to notice changes in middle school. Instead of wanting to go into a store and, Mom, I can do it on my own, you know, she wanted me to be right beside her, and she wanted me to do all the talking. A lot of issues with anxiety, and I think eventually the anxiety led to depression.
I wasn't sure at the time. Like, I knew logically it was a good idea. I was just scared about opening up to someone, because so many times when I had tried, I had been shut down because my dad thought, like, oh, it's just your friend group. Like, you're just trying to fit in. You're not actually experiencing these. You just want to fit in with this group of friends you have. Like, to an extent, yeah, I wanted to fit in with them, but I was also feeling very real feelings and really struggling.
ACE scores, which stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, is a survey that you can take, anyone can take online. It's a matter of points, and then you add up the points to figure out how much risk factors are in your life. For instance, if you're a kid from divorced parents, or you've been abused, or anything, all these different categories you score. There's been many reports lately that the ACE scores in Humboldt County have really escalated. And of course we know, and the research proves, that the higher the ACE score, the more mental health challenges individuals have. Humboldt County is really high in kids with issues. That's why we really want to help these foster kids that age out, and other, you know, transgender kids. They need all the support they can get.
My name is Nicole Halverson. I was born and raised in Humboldt County, and I lost my brother Chase to suicide in January of this year. He was a dreamy kid, you know. I think I brought it up in his obituary when I wrote it. You know, when he went to T-ball, his whole focus was go in the outfield, pick all the grass, stick it underneath my baseball cap because that'll dye my hair green. And I mean, he just was a sweet little boy, smart, but not in ways that traditional schooling super likes, right? So he would finish all of his classwork and then be drawing in the margins. Or he could take apart his radio and put it back together with almost all of the pieces. You know, but then having to read out loud in class wasn't really his thing. I think he struggled in school a little bit, but he always had enough of a sense of humor that he kind of skated by, I feel like.
Most tribal organizations have a department of their tribe or their organization that focuses on suicide prevention. And I think we've done a really good job of preventing. And at the same time, we know that within rural communities such as ours, within Humboldt County, there is elevated rates of suicide, but I think that we're on the right path.
So we kind of exist in this in-between place, right? Because we are more Shasta than we are Karuk. The Shasta tribe is not federally recognized. So I, for instance, am enrolled as a tribal member with the Karuk tribe, but we weren't involved with the community of the tribal members growing up. And so, and like my grandpa, for instance, never signed up for the tribe. He didn't want, you know, he grew up in Mount Shasta, where being Native American was, you were a second-class citizen.
Sometimes lack of opportunities. I think that there can be a tendency to encounter more sort of structural, systemic issues such as poverty, such as lack of resources, that increases your likelihood of feeling despair, which is loneliness, lack of purpose, lack of meaning. And in many rural communities, that existential despair often is more intense.
The main resiliency factor for our kids is one adult that will be that kid's mentor. It could be the school janitor, it could be an uncle, But research has shown that if a child has just one person that monitors them and cares about them and connects with them, that can make a huge difference. And you hear success stories all the time of these kids, people that have overcome all kinds of difficulties and actually are amazing. But part of it is because they've had somebody that cared.
My mom left when I was 10. It actually was the first time our bio dad had hit my brother across the face hard enough to leave a mark. And so she left him, which was great. We were homeless for a little while, couch surfing. We slept in sleeping bags in, empty rentals and stuff for a long time. When I was 13, my mom married our stepdad, who was a great influence, and then we were able to move to his beautiful house in Bayside, which was old, but it was fun. It was like an old farmhouse. And so then I had a big shift because I went from being the second adult in the family, right, until now I've got all these rules and regulations and lights out by 9. And I think Chase kind of had trouble with that shift too. He did okay until, he moved out of the house and was kind of on his own, and then his drinking got pretty bad. He was always telling me, like, well, don't worry about me. Like, you've got your own stuff going on. Like, don't worry about me. And so he would really downplay the situation a lot. And as long as he had an apartment to live in, which he did with a good friend from high school for a long time, he kind of kept it together. But once that roommate moved out and Chase didn't get another roommate in and then chose to leave the apartment or got kicked out, I'm not sure, it really took it downhill. He was homeless in Arcata. And he was drinking so heavily that I got a phone call when he was on a road trip with some friends, because I think to also make them not worry, he had decided to just stop drinking for the trip. Well, he was so dependent on alcohol physically that he had a seizure while they're heading down to go to their friend's wedding. I had hoped it would be a big wake-up call. It definitely clued me into, no, this is a problem. And unfortunately, it still didn't really get paid attention to. I feel like there was always an assumption that, like, oh, well, we'll see the signs and we'll stop it. And then that kind of clouds your vision, right? So that you're not actually seeing the signs. I had made a lot of calls locally to like rehab centers to try and figure out, well, where can he go? We don't have the money to send him to something super fancy. And what I ran into, which I understand because of privacy policies and stuff, was, well, we can't give you any info over the phone. And I'm like, well, can you at least tell me, is it 2 weeks of not talking to anybody and then you can have phone call, can you give me a basic outline? Like, I'm trying to pitch a sale here. It's basically what it felt like. Like, I have to be able to give him everything because, one of the things about my brother that I think nowadays would have gotten diagnosed as some kind of neurodivergence was the unknown was paralyzing to him. And so for me, I'm going like, okay, like, just tell me, like, we got to check in, and then, like, what does the days look like? They wouldn't give me any of that info. And so then I didn't make the sale.
I knew that she needed help. I believed her when she told me. So we attempted to get her help. It was probably 9 months where I knew she was in crisis. I didn't understand the extent. And so I started calling every provider that I could, and was turned away over and over and over again. There's just simply not enough providers in Humboldt County.
I know she was trying really hard to find me help, but there's no one out here. Like, it's incredibly hard to find any sort of help out here.
The reasons just piled on one on top of another. At first, it was just I couldn't find someone who was accepting new clients. And then I had a friend who said, here's someone who I know is accepting new clients, give them a call. So I gave them a call, and they weren't interested in working with children. She had insurance through myself, she had Medi-Cal, she had insurance through her dad and insurance through her stepmom, and I still couldn't find a provider for her. And then at one point I actually walked into the place where I worked, but for a different program, and asked, and they said, yes, but we only take Medi-Cal. And I was, that's fantastic, I have Medi-Cal. And she also has this and this, and they, oh, we can't take her unless she only has Medi-Cal. So it was just, you know, either people didn't take the 3 types of insurance that she did have, they weren't accepting new clients, didn't want to work with children, or she was overinsured. I just could not find help for her.
You know, there's never enough docs, and psychiatrists especially. Our docs age out, and then there's not a lot of young people drawn to this area to be providers. The airport can be difficult. So I think to get and keep a well professional workforce is challenging.
He got a DUI, and then he got a second DUI. He couldn't possibly keep up, right? So then he stopped even trying to keep up. And I tried to get him to move in here in my spare bedroom, and what he told me was there are no bars in Lolita. That's where he had his friends. That's where he talked to people. And when you have no mental health support, you have no therapist to talk to, I think seeing the exact same face at Blondie's every day is reassuring. So, you know, people dismiss it as him choosing alcohol over getting help, and I'm like, I think he was trying to get help in the only way that was accessible to him.
So after her attempt, I took her to the ER, and at that point, everything was taken out of our hands. We were pretty much told what was going to happen. She spent, I want to say 2 or 3 nights in the ER because there was not a bed locally. You know, the county was going to send her somewhere residential, but there is nowhere in the county for adolescents. There was a point where they told me they were going to send her to San Francisco. I rode with her in the ambulance, and so ended up for a week in San Francisco with the clothes on my back. It was incredibly difficult having this girl who had just always been by my side. You know, even though her dad and I had split custody, we were always really close. To only be able to see her for an hour a day with her dad and in a room full of other people, there wasn't really much of a chance to talk or to connect or, you know, really get a sense for where she was, besides that she was miserable.
I mean, there was a good year. I didn't know how to find him. I didn't know how to call him. I offered to put him on my cell phone plan, and he wouldn't. Oh, no, I'm gonna, you know, as soon as XYZ, I'm gonna get my own, it'll be okay. And I remember telling him, I was like, Chase, can I buy you one of those burners just so I know? And even when you were offering him help like that, I think he still felt like he was a burden. Chase and I, Ende and I, were so trauma bonded from our childhood that it was a constant. You know, I don't know where my brother is. I don't, you know, sending him memes on Facebook because at least if he liked him, I knew he was alive.
When we're talking about suicide, when we're talking about struggle, human suffering often, it's complex. And oftentimes it's a combination of biological, psychological, social issues. And we need to take that seriously. How we should talk to them is first listen, is to show through your actions that they're important, that they matter. And then you get in conversation with them, asking open-ended questions. More times than not, people that are feeling suicidal will let you know. But those questions, being open-ended, it kind of gets you down to the core of what they're thinking and feeling, right? Because you could ask somebody right at the beginning of a conversation and they maybe say no. But if you listen to them, if you build the relationship, if you're respectful, if you're kind, if you really see them and their inner experience as much as you can, it makes them often feel comfortable and safe to share and be vulnerable about some of their struggles. And so, you know, for me and us at Two Feathers, I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all, I'm going to follow this protocol to assess for suicide. It's more relationally based. It's more treating the person with respect, with dignity, with kindness, and being really curious about their inner experience and what's going on for them. That's one of the best kind of assessments that you can do.
The support groups I do with families, they can find out, you know, how to get into the system, who to call, what to do. Like when my son had issues, I knew to contact the mental health clinician in the jail because they were only going to hold him 3 hours and let him go. And he was mentally ill, but they thought he was just drunk. But if families don't know how to intervene like that, he would have just been kept for 3 or 4 hours, sobered up, and let go again. It's such a complicated system. Mental health hospitals don't talk to each other. So a lot of times when your kid is in Red Bluff or San Francisco, they don't communicate with other people. The jail sometimes can't communicate with other hospitals. So it's the whole communication thing. It's the family that keeps it together. You know, the family knows where the person was and what the diagnosis, you know, so they're an integral part of all this prevention and treatment. If I could wave a magic wand, everybody would see mental illness as a chemical, biological brain disorder, just like a heart. If you go to the hospital with a heart attack, you leave with statins, you leave with a follow-up appointment, probably with a cardiac. You leave with a lot of care and follow-up. If you go in fact, 89% of people have touched base with the medical profession before they actually end their life. If that time when they touched that system, there was follow-up, prevention, maybe a peer coach, whatever, that could help reduce those suicides.
And so I wish there was something, some kind of a walk-in service where you don't have to be so bad that they've decided, okay, I guess we'll see you. And someplace where you're allowed to be good as well in the eyes, right? A lot of times people think that I am just fine when I am losing my mind inside because I have learned to mask over the years. And Chase did too. My sister did too.
It was the most anxiety I've ever had with parenting, to be afraid of making a misstep or saying the wrong thing or making the wrong decision and expecting that it could possibly lead to her death. I just wish there were more options.
If I could talk to myself back then as the person I am now, I probably would, it sounds cheesy, but it gets better. Like, it doesn't feel like it. It feels like this is never gonna end, like this is reality now, but it gets better. You get the help you need. Don't be afraid to reach out to people. There are more people there for you than you think. You have a lot of people backing you in your corner. The longer you keep pushing, the better it gets.
Yeah, when I was growing up, we weren't talking about mental health like we are today. And one of the things that we're trying to do at Two Feathers is improve the mental health systems and programming in Humboldt County to be a model. And one of the things that I think is really important, because of how rural we are, is we have to go to where the community is. It's often unnecessary suffering. And so how do you support somebody that's suffering? You support them with kindness. You support them with trying your best to show that they matter. So making sure that you do your best to get them out of that state of crisis, to provide some safety, and continue to work with them, because oftentimes it doesn't go away in the immediate. We want to work with people, family members, work with people to set them on a path so that we prevent it in the future.
You got me!
I think I'm supposed to stand up and say thank you, and thank you guys. We're going to take a brief break. Don't forget about the surveys. Please eat some of this food, and we'll see you back in a few for the panel.
KEET-TV is happy to announce that a new season of What's on Your Bucket List will be premiering soon. Please join us as our bucketeers explore the beauty and color of the Humboldt Botanical Garden.
Oh, yeah, it is. Isn't that beautiful? Oh, thank you. you, honey. Oh, aren't they beautiful together? Oh.
Meet some new friends at the Sequoia Park Zoo. Learn how to make a custom marble. Create a psychedelic tie-dye shirt.
How am I doing, Lacey?
Good so far.
See how goat cheese is produced at Cypress Grove Chev. Shear a sheep with the Foggy Bottoms boys. Try to stay afloat on a paddleboard in Humboldt Bay.
How you doing? Well, it's harder to stand up than I thought.
Yeah, yep.
Go fly a kite on a windy afternoon.
One, two, pull back and walk. There you go. There you go. All right. Belly, belly. There you go. Now come back over here. Left, left, left. Oh, there you go. Woo!
Experience the native history of Humboldt Bay while cruising on the Madigan.
Well, there's all kinds of village sites around the bay. During the ceremonies, that's when everybody came out
And stayed.
and stayed.
And take a speeder ride along the train tracks of the bay. So, what's on your bucket list?
We also runs, and it's been like I used to do trainings all the time, and I felt like in the 3 years of COVID, pretty much.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for staying for the film and being part of this panel. We are really honored to have so many experts with so much experience in a wide variety of fields with us tonight. Before we get started with introductions and with questions from our audience here and out there in the wider KEET sphere, you can send us questions via Facebook if you are watching online. I want to touch on really quickly one thing about this process. We are really careful when we talk about suicide not to talk about methodology or how someone chooses to end their life. It can be triggering, so I just wanted to remind our audience of that and make sure that we have good boundaries in place around that. So thank you. So really quickly, I'm going to introduce our panel, beginning with on my left. This is Gardner Carlson. Gardner Carlson is a parent and also on the Humboldt County chapter of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or Nami. He is on their board. Welcome, Gardner.
Thank you.
And then we have Leah Nagy. Leah is the president of the board of directors for Nami Humboldt. Welcome, Leah.
Thank you.
And we have Elizabeth Rose-Marini, and she is with the Eureka VHA. Excuse me, I lost my acronym there for a minute, but very welcome.
Nothing but acronyms, so sorry.
And Leah is our local expert on the topic of suicide with veterans. And we also have Mark Lamers with the Department of Health and Human Services and Behavioral Health. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
And finally, last but not least, we have Dr. Virgil Moorehead, the junior, the executive director of Two Feathers Native American Family Services. Welcome, Virgil.
Thank you. Welcome.
So I'd like to start just really quickly on some topics that we touched on in the film. And I thought maybe it'd be a good idea, Mark, to start with you. And could you just tell us a little bit about what we're seeing currently on in terms of suicide rates and trends in Humboldt County?
Sadly, Humboldt County historically and currently has a higher than average rate of suicide. Among California counties, we're one of the generally one or two highest, with something on the order of 20 more or less suicides per 100,000. The rate in California tends to be down towards 11. So it's considered that that is a reflection of our rural nature, the isolated nature of many of our communities, and the high incidence of substance use and easy access to firearms, typically. So there's an active process here in Humboldt County with the Suicide Mortality Review Board where these trends get looked at, and we are all the time trying to determine interventions that allow us to intervene farther upstream to help address those numbers. We've got a really active program called QPR, trainings, question, persuade, refer, that goes out into the community and trains people to be to intervene in with folks that may be heading down that path. And it's something we're really aware of and are constantly working on.
Thank you. Virgil, one of the topics that we didn't get to explore in as much depth as I would have liked is some of the really innovative work that is happening in tribal communities right now. Could you tell us a little bit about some of the services that you provide at Two Feathers and some of the work that's being done in those communities?
Yeah, I think, we, as many of you may be aware, we have a really strong, diverse Native population in Humboldt County. And, we have a lot of different tribes and organizations tackling suicide prevention. I think one of the things that has been
guess, innovative, or just maybe there's more resources and attention is school-based mental health services, and going in the schools, building really strong partnerships with the schools and doing cultural-based programming, such as, at Two Feathers, we have a program called Acorn, Two Feathers Acorn Youth Wellness, and we use principles from the flower dance, which is a young girl's coming of age ceremony, and the stick game, which is all the local native men and young men played since day one. We use those principles and teachings in that program from the flower dance and stick game to work on mental health issues, to work on substance abuse issues. We do, a lot of different just social gatherings. And so I think there's a lot going on in the tribal community. One of the last things I'll say around the innovation is just that, we did have an epidemic here within the Native communities in 2015-16. And I think that our community rallied together. We came together. A building was built, trainings, QPR. Folks bought wrestling mats and different kind of sports, brought sports into the most rural sort of parts of our county as a response. And so I think, we want to continue that momentum.
That is so cool. And I just want to touch on that really quickly. One of the things you said in the documentary is that we need to bring services to where people are. Humboldt County there are so many communities here that are very remote, hard to reach, far-flung and isolated. So what does that look like on the ground? What does it look like to actually bring services to people in these communities?
Yeah, I think, I was just on a meeting with Cal Poly Humboldt Social Work Department, and they've, building these school-based social work interns and clinicians. And so, we've had a fabulous, I think, partnership with Cal Poly Humboldt. And, I think they do a good training program around, prioritizing Native tribal communities, remote communities. And so what it looks like is, first off, I think people, not so much programs, help people. And so finding the right people that are committed to this work. And so some of our social work clinicians, they're driving literally 3 hours, 2 to 3 times a week, sometimes one way because of the road construction, to Orleans, to Witchpeck, to Klamath, to Lolita, other places that, and going to their house, going to the schools. And I think one of the presenters that talked to the video talked about the importance of that one adult, that one positive adult. And that's really what they're doing, but we have to go and be persistent. And the last thing I'll say is that they keep calling. They keep showing up. And, we have one clinician that I looked at her notes. I called, nobody answered. I called, she didn't want to meet today. I called again. I showed up in her classroom 7, 8 times. Then I look at the notes, 3 months down the road, they're meeting weekly. And that's in Orleans. And she lives in Eureka.
Wow. So I have a lot of questions for all of our panelists, but I do want to give our audience a chance to ask their own questions. And we have a mic, I believe, that can travel around. So does anyone want to get us started? They're all shy. I can't hear you when y'all talk at once. Please, go, would you mind?
Hi, my name is Emily. I'm not sure if this, who to ask, but one thing that was mentioned by Stacy, I believe, she had talked about before her daughter attempted suicide for 9 months, she was trying to get services for her daughter. And for those of you that are up there on the panel, if you know somebody, or if I were to know somebody that was struggling, how do you break down those barriers when there's a lot of people that are not accepting clients, or insurance is an issue, or just overall services? Like, what do I do as a friend, as a person? I'm currently a transition coordinator for Tri-County Independent Living. And so, you know, within my job, this is going to be something that I might work with as well. And this is also something I'm very passionate about. So what do you recommend that I do in the community to help assist with this?
For what it's worth, there's all kinds of different services, substance abuse treatment, mental health treatment. One of the challenges is for folks to know who, like what level of care are they looking for somebody. It's a separate issue to find an outpatient provider in the community than finding acute treatment for somebody who's currently expressing suicidal ideation or something. One of the easiest ways to access resources that I could provide to you is we have a helpline, 445-7715 is the number. There's some resource sheets that have been provided as well. And that's the crisis line at Humboldt County Mental Behavioral Health. And if you call that number and describe the issue, the person that answers that phone can point you in the right direction. And you know, especially if it's somebody who's needing more acute treatment, they can help open the doors. I understand and I really appreciate how frustrating it is for people that don't know what door to go through, what number to reach out to. But if that number gets used as an initial step, it can help hopefully to point you in the right direction. Substance use issues and things like that, one of the challenges is people generally have to voluntarily get those services. So even when family members are recognizing the necessity for getting that kind of help for somebody, one of the main barriers is the participation of the person who really needs the help. So I hear that frustration and have really appreciate how difficult it can be.
So Linda, I'd like to add a little more too, because this topic comes up in our support groups probably every week. And I think one value of Zoom, which I hate Zoom, everybody knows I hate Zoom, but I just heard on NPR, I was driving in my car today and it said there were 25,000 clinicians available through, and I can't even remember the name of the company, but I think with Zoom, it is allowing clinicians to see perhaps more people. And so hopefully that's gonna lighten the burden of trying to find help. My son in Reading, my granddaughter attempted suicide when she was 16, and the only psychiatrist in Reading were not approved by the insurance company. So my son went ahead and took my granddaughter to a provider, and then for a year argued to get back the out-of-network cost, and he won the case. And then I talked to somebody at Partnership, and they said, appeal it, appeal it. We have so few providers up here that oftentimes the insurance companies don't have somebody in Oakland or Santa Rosa, which, you know, they don't even realize it's miles from here. So I just encourage families, and like Mark said, to just pursue, there's a North American mental health program now that some people are using, but just pursue it and, you know, contact Nami Humboldt for ideas, the county, you know, we all work together to get these resources and to find out what works. But it is a major challenge. This insurance stuff is wild. That's all I can say.
I have something for you. This is just a Humboldt County resource, very complete.
Thank you. May I keep this?
Yeah, it's for you.
Well, that reminds me, I got a bunch of flyers in my bag too. I'll have to get them out. So before you guys leave, if you want, I'll put them over here by the cookies.
We do have a lot of information on that table over there.
Oh, it's over there. Should I put them over there, Linda?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll put them over there then.
I'm so sorry. Could I ask someone to give me my water? I just realized my mouth is going dry up here.
I was also going to say for veterans, I would
Thank
call
you.
the Veterans Crisis Line first, because we do route people to resources in their area. So if the individual that you're trying to assist is a veteran, you can do 988 press 1. We're on the 988 system now, just like everyone else. We also have a good local resource here in the clinic for those who are eligible for the health care through the VA. And they do mental health as well as medical triage Monday through Friday. So that is helpful. Now, we're dealing with the same issues with staffing because of, everything everyone else has said, the remoteness of it, and trying to get people to stay and all of that. I know there's been an effort made within our organization to hire teletherapists nationwide that can be made available for counseling purposes. And we are also referring, although not necessarily locally, but there are some teletherapy resources in state. But we still face the same difficulties getting people, face-to-face services here in the county that many others do. But I would say make that 988 press 1 call first.
So thank you so much, Rose. And I wanted to, you sent me some statistics about suicide rates among veterans, and I just wanted to read this one out because I find it really shocking. So nationally, veterans are 2 times more likely to die by suicide than the general population. For veterans in Humboldt County, they are 6.5 times more likely.
Yes, that's correct.
Can you tell me a little bit more about what you're seeing on the ground in terms of your people at the VA?
Sure. Well, there's a few different things going on. I mean, one thing to bear in mind when you hear those statistics, veterans are about 7% of our county population, give or take, depending on your source. And only 30% of them are enrolled in VA care. So out of, 8,000 to 9,000, around 2,000 plus. We also have an older population, I think, in the county in general, and certainly among veterans. A lot of ours are the Vietnam and just post-Vietnam era, so people 50 plus and up. There are some pretty common triggers. I mean, we do have veterans dealing with PTSD, although, and I'll say this again later, it doesn't define veterans in general. We just tend to see this a lot in the media, and that's what we're talking about here tonight, so we'll do that. So I think oftentimes kind of a typical profile would be someone in that older age group, usually a white male, with a social isolation, and oftentimes with a recent, very difficult medical diagnosis. And I think there are some things about military culture and the experience of service, particularly if there's exposure to combat trauma, that often causes veterans to keep that information to themselves and tend not to reach out to others for assistance. The problem is when you have someone who's been doing that for 60 or 80 years of their life, there can be an implosion. So getting people connected to resources, reaching out, asking questions, are you okay? And one of the nice things I've been getting from working with our suicide prevention network here in the county, which anyone can join, by the way, is we are putting together a resource base of all of the trainings. So if you want to feel more comfortable having that conversation, or you want to make sure other people are more comfortable having that conversation, there are so many trainings. QPR is certainly one of them. VA does something called VA Save that similarly is rather based on QPR and also gives a little more information about some of the things that veterans are dealing with that make that population a little unique. Having that practice of discussing it with people, I think all of those things can help. But yeah, that's a lot of what we're seeing.
Thank you. And I just want to throw out really quick, we've been hearing this acronym QPR a couple of times, and we did hear the full title for it, but maybe one of you can tell us what QPR stands for.
Sure. Question, persuade, refer.
Oh, I wonder wonder whose that is. It's okay. Okay, so question, persuade, refer, and this is the recommended protocol for someone who is experiencing suicidal ideation. So some of the words that I heard in the film and from my panel here, from folks who are having suicidal ideation, suicidal thoughts, there's discussion of feeling isolated, feeling like a burden. What are some other warning signs that someone might be having suicidal thoughts, suicidal ideation? I'd invite anyone to take that.
Often people think it's the solution to the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And they may think that they have taken steps to address it, often by disclosing things that we recognize as red flags. And they often think that they've tried to get help and people haven't listened to them. And so it's one of the, it's one of the reasons that, for example, in the QPR question, persuade, refer training, people are taught to say, if I was saying the kind of things that you're saying, or if I was feeling the way that you're feeling, I might be thinking of harming myself. Are you thinking of suicide right now? And have that, and believe it or not, often people who are in that state have a great sense of relief when somebody recognizes what they're going through. And they said, oh my God, can I talk to you about it? Yeah, sure, let's talk about it.
And it's a myth that if you ask about suicide, it's going to cause somebody to actually take their life. Just one statistic from this book, Healing Our Path from Mental Illness to Mental Health by Thomas Insel. He said that 78% of people who have died by suicide don't, or they actually deny that they're going to take their own lives with the last conversation that they have with someone. So I think Virgil made a great point in the film where I think in the beginning, get to know them, talk to them, build rapport, and then on down the line, they might feel trusted enough to say something. But I think, you can't, they may or may not, tell you that they're thinking of harming themselves. And then I think too of not, I remember I did groups on sempervirence for 5 years. I called them recovery groups. And I remember this one young man who was at a rest area in Humboldt County and was gonna take his life. And these strangers came up and started talking to him. And he said that made all the difference in the world. He decided that he wasn't gonna take his life. So I think just reaching out, one-on-one with someone that needs some compassion is a good start. I just wanted to add that. Linda?
I would like to add, too, that changes in behavior and withdrawal, depression, and then sudden spurts of energy. And when I say the energy, the other thing, when you're talking to someone, you're trying to be with them, there's a period of time that is kind of, you want to be safe. So actually staying with the person during a period of impulsivity, and then if there is, do they have access? Do they have not only a plan, but are there guns? Are there loaded guns in the house? That's like number one. But there could be a lot of other things. So I like to think of merging in traffic and getting in the same lane and next to the person in an empathetic way.
Yeah, I think connectedness, safety, and time are three of the hugest and most important factors in, trying to assist someone who you think is at risk. Obviously compassion, because if someone's feeling isolated, they're in a place where they can't connect or don't feel like they can, or there is no help. I think making sure, of course, that, as you were saying, securing any potential means, firearms are certainly one, but others as well, it gives you time. And that's time for them to change their mind. That's time for you to be able to connect them or find them, get them to a resource, find whatever it is in them that wants to live and maybe amplify that, or find a resource that might help them. All of those things make a huge difference.
Often people have a window of crisis where they feel that this is the moment when that's going to occur. And it's remarkable, having spoken with many, many survivors of attempts, how once they get to the other side of it, they're no longer a danger to themselves. That it's something that there's antecedents leading up to it. And if someone can intervene, it can be just amazingly successful. And so, you know, recognizing those red flags in advance, and the kind of advice of, you know what, it gets better. It gets better. It seems really bad right now, but keep putting one foot in front of the other, and you'll work your way through this. And tomorrow you'll have a different perspective on things. Remarkably true for folks, surprisingly.
And this is reminding me a little bit about what Virgil said in the documentary about having relationally based, you know, interactions with people. And I really wanted to explore that a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, Virgil.
Yeah, I think, you know, something that's coming up for me is, you know, there is this, sometimes, this sort of automatic sort of connection, suicide, mental health, like it's one and the same, and it's not. Now, it's often an issue, but it's often not. And one of the, you know, things that I think about is, you know, not so much framing it in a sort of biological, medical, that's one part of the story. But there's also spiritual, sort of existential despair. And really, you know, I think somebody mentioned loneliness, isolation, combination of loneliness and lack of meaning make it really hard on people. And so I think that if we're relationally based, we're not only in our work trying to positively impact and work with the individual, but we should also be working in the community to create opportunities for relationships, for those magical moments of connection and community building. That, you know, one of the things that we've been thinking about lately at Two Feathers is you know, there's just some of those people that are really good with kids. And they sometimes outperform in the sense of connection and support for our Native youth than the most highly trained mental health clinician. So we want to look at and put those kind of people in front of our kids. And then we want to look at, you know, sports, music, community, getting kids out of sitting in their room, watching Netflix or playing video games. Because those things, I think, drive, or more times than not, can lead to despair, suffering. And so this is all to say, you know, the relationship piece is to impact the one-on-one relationship, but at the same time, how do we work together as a community to impact the environment around the people so that they're more likely to get in relationship? They're more likely to be able to create meaning. So is that jobs? Is that housing? Is that just a good amount of money so you can live? Those are factors that are just as important as the sort of kind of biological, clinically significant depression. And so I think that's something to think about.
I think feeling that you still contribute to your community in some way, even if it's something as simple as just feeling like you belong to a community. You know, I think that happens, certainly with our older veterans who become isolated. Whatever skills and experience and knowledge they have is no longer being shared. So it's very easy for someone in that situation to feel like they don't matter. And part of connecting, and certainly I think peer support is hugely important, is finding some way for them to feel valued, you know, whether it is telling their story or showing a kid how to fix a car, you know, whatever it might be. And oftentimes that comes from the people around them. You know, it isn't necessarily the intervention of therapy per se. That can be helpful, but often it's just hearing from you, a friend or, you know, a neighbor, that something about them is needed and valued.
I got to give a shout out for this young lady named Lupita at Fortuna High. She started talking to me about a support group for kids. We don't have support groups for kids that I know of. Nami Humboldt doesn't have any. She started one. She had 21 kids the first meeting, and she's talking about topics the kids want to talk about. And I don't know if you guys have been around young people, but they often talk their friends out of suicide. I have granddaughters that tell me, yeah, my friend called me up, I got him help. So I think reaching these younger children, these kids, and not only on Instagram and TikTok and all that stuff, but in person, you know, real groups. And so Lupita does groups after school at Fortuna High. Nami Humboldt is providing the pizzas, because that's how you get kids to come to meetings, is with pizza. But I think Virgil has got a point. We need to, you know, support these kids, and they want to talk about, you know, mental health stuff. I remember I was at Fortuna High probably 5-6 years ago, just did a little spiel on mental health, and one kid raised his hand and said, do they still do frontal lobotomies? And I remember thinking, my God, these kids, they don't have the education that they need. In Australia, they have what they call a black dog program, and they view mental health like PE. So from kindergarten through 12th grade, all the kids take mental health, and they might talk about emotions or caregiving or whatever, each other. And they say that mental health is a team sport. It's a whole collection of people keeping each other healthy. And Australia has reduced their suicide amount by at least 20% with kids. So I think we need to think in our community, you know, things that will help. And I like to talk about prevention and intervention, but I'll mention a few more things later if we have time.
Absolutely. I do think we have a question from our online audience. Heather, go ahead.
Yeah, we have a question from Debbie. Her question is, 988 call initiated. The person under duress requested no police and no name was given to 988. Time was helpful knowing they were cared about. How do we know how much time is needed?
I didn't understand.
I'm having a little trouble interpreting that. Could you reread it?
Yeah, so her question is, so when a 988 call is initiated and the person under duress requests no police and no name is given, time is helpful knowing they were cared about. How do we know how much time is needed?
I think I understand.
Before taking it to another level or something, perhaps? Or how much time is needed for a person to process what they're going through?
Debbie, if you're still listening, will you please update in the chat?
If what you mean perhaps is how much time that person who's listening should be spending with them, I think it's until you feel you've made a connection and that you have some kind of buy-in from that person to seek resources, and then you work with them. That's generally how those protocols go. So there isn't a specific amount of time that's dedicated on a crisis line, for example. You can only talk to them for 5 minutes. That's not true. They will speak with that person until they make that connection, and then try and, you know, move them to additional help.
And the person may often tell you that they've gotten the help that they've needed.
And I would just add, you know, one of the things, we have a lot of sort of early career clinicians, and one of the things is like, all right, they mentioned a crisis, they mentioned that they're thinking about suicide, and I'm got to report it, or I got to make that next step. But they might end the relationship. They say that they're not going to see me anymore if you call the cops. And so, you know, I think that it's important to state that make the move. more times than not, when you to put people in front of resources and to make that step. And what I found, I'm trained as a clinical psychologist, and what I found in also in supervision with early career clinicians, that people appreciate you taking that extra step. So shy on the side of taking that extra step if you think there's a concern and there's safety issues.
I think also there is, I've heard this myth going around that calling the crisis line will automatically mean that they'll send the police to your house. That is not the case. The goal is to connect with that person first and foremost, to try and help ameliorate some of whatever suffering they're going through, and then figuring out how best to help them. You know, that is really the action of last resort, when all other efforts to connect with that person have failed and they continue to express a serious commitment with a plan, intent, and means to commit suicide. So nobody wants to do that. Sometimes they have to, but rarely, if we can.
And you know, there's a whole nationwide movement now to decriminalize mental illness and not always use a police officer. I just attended a CIT training in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Exciting stuff for us as family members who do not want to involve law enforcement or have our loved ones handcuffed to get help or taken, So this is exciting. Pay attention to Humboldt County. We are on the forefront of this. When I went to the conference, I was very impressed by the work that we're doing here with peer support counselors and people riding along with the sheriffs now, and with Arcata. Arcata just started a whole outreach program. So it's exciting here, and it's such a relief for us as family members not to have to dial that call to get our kids handcuffed or whatever. Anyway, just wanted to share that with you guys. I don't know if you knew that.
That's cool.
Debbie says thank you.
Thanks, Heather. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Come on up.
All right, it was a toss-up between really listening to what you guys are doing and trying to formulate my question at the same time. Big advocate and condoning what you guys are doing, outreach, cultural specific, things like that. I've spent the last 17 years as an ancillary emergency
If there were more people and more money and more beds, these problems would be less bad. And to think of where they're going to come from, you know, I'm not sure anybody really knows. I appreciate that the hospitals and behavioral health try to work together as well as they can to address this intractable problem. It's really, it's a challenge for everybody, and there's nobody looking at it and saying, this works for me. I apologize if that doesn't really answer your question, but I can acknowledge the frustration of the experience.
Also, I'll add that Waterfront Recovery Center and St. Joseph's Hospital is working, I don't know if you've heard this, but they're working on a safe house or a crisis stabilization area where people who don't really need to be 5150 on SV could go and get help. Vice versa, people released from sempervirence who need more time to stabilize could perhaps go there. That might help relieve some of the issues in the ERs, but like Mark said, then they have to find staff, you know, qualified staff to run them. The name of the Adolescent Treatment Center is Sorrel Leaf, and they do have a website, and I believe they're gonna have 9 beds and open up in about a year. Just, you know, more information, but we are so glad that our kids will have a chance to stay in Humboldt County. They will take kids from other counties, but they did say their priority would be first for children here in Humboldt County. So that's just a little more information for you.
Do we have another audience question? Just Lynette and then...
First, I want to thank everybody for being here tonight and addressing this incredibly important, critical issue here in Humboldt County, everywhere, but for us tonight, especially Humboldt County. So unfortunately, because this is not uncommon in Humboldt, there are also a lot of families not only dealing with the loss of a loved one, but a loss of a loved one under these particular circumstances, which I would imagine brings up feelings of responsibility, guilt, fear, a million emotions. Is there anything anybody can offer here, just in general speaking, to maybe family members that are listening tonight, and advice that you can give to friends of people that have that know somebody that's lost somebody to suicide? Thank you.
Gardner, I think that question's for you.
Oh my God. Well, I think that some of the answers that are available are different community resources, and I think that not isolating and dealing with your grief, expressing your grief in a group setting is extremely helpful. So these are emotional support groups for people who are grieving. An example of a group would be Nami, and that is one group. There are other ways to get that support, but it's just so helpful to be able to share your feelings and the feelings of it doesn't go away right away, the grief. It's something that you, or I, having lost my son to suicide and have, that was my older son, my youngest son, who has attempted suicide. So certainly that's something I carry around. And I don't know, not holding that inside and not isolating myself. But the other thing is believing in hope and finding hope in your life and being able to communicate that is something that you can share with other people. And expanding your horizons beyond your grief is extremely important in terms of your physical and mental well-being. It's different for every person, but it's like anything else. Once you reground yourself and you're actually able to find some success within yourself, it's kind of self-reinforcing. And believe it or not, it actually enables you to be also an effective conduit to help other people. And in many cases, I know for me, it's been very important in retirement, to find a role in which I can be helpful in the community that would support people who are in crisis.
And I'll just add the idea that you're not alone, the idea that other people share your similar experiences, similar feelings, and it becomes a really important support group for folks to deal with all the challenges that life brings, in addition, to loved ones with mental health challenges or with suicidal ideation. So, and our groups are free, open to the community. You can come. I always tell people, come when you want to, leave when you want to. It's your group, and you can attend it as you want. And if you need information, just I'm going to put some flyers over here so you can pick one up. But I just think, especially in our culture, we just don't talk about suicide or mental illness enough. So I know when my son was first diagnosed, I didn't even know where sempervirens was, and I had a master's degree from Humboldt State. So what does that say? So anyway, I mean, we just need to talk more about it. And this is a safe, confidential group where you can share your true feelings about things.
I want to add, as a host, it's not really my job to editorialize, but I feel like it's important to say that when I began working on this project and I told people what I was working on, I was amazed at how many people in my life, in my community, the wider community, have a family member, a loved one who died by suicide. And again, I think it's really important to take these steps to destigmatize talking about it. Grief is a really sacred experience. And I think often the stigma around suicide prevents us from experiencing the full cycle of grief because we're sometimes discouraged from talking about the person we lost. So this is something that we're taking steps to change now. And we had another audience question.
Well, I've known Leah Nagy for many, many years. We share our sons together. Our sons kind of grew up together. And I want to thank all of you for trying to reach the young people, because that's where it starts, is when the people are young. But please don't forget the people that have grown up with mental problems and substance abuse, and now they're adults. And I hope that we don't only concentrate on the young people. It's just the whole picture. It's the whole picture of people that are in despair. And I just, I was thinking of that word, and I was thinking of when people have no hope. It's a Nami precept, I guess, is the thing, is we will never give up hope. Never give up hope. And at the last Nami meeting I attended, my work schedule doesn't allow it now, I said, I have no hope. I have given up hope. There's probably this much in the back of my head, because as a parent, you don't. But my son is almost 50 years old. And, you can lead a horse to water, can't make him drink. So with the suicide issue, I don't want to just talk with no point. For a few years now, I have tried to think, oh my God, I hope a cop doesn't come to my door with that message for me that they found my son dead. because with his lifestyle, I see him killing himself slowly every day. People on the street. I mean, I work in Eureka. I drive back and forth from Arcadia to Eureka. You see adults on the street. They're dying. They just don't take the gun, but they're dying. So anyway, thank you for your help, and I'm sorry about my long comment.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you. I think it's a very valuable comment and reflective of where I think many people are. You know, I know within VA we do have a program called Coaching into Care, which is designed for family members and friends of those who know veterans that may need help, mostly to support them in dealing with it and finding ways to encourage that person to seek the help that is needed. AFSP Resources, American Federation for Suicide Prevention, I believe has some consulting services like that. But it can be very, very difficult to be a friend or family member with someone who is an adult. Yeah, it's tough.
With a lot of the folks that we see in that situation as well, there are people that know that they're there. There are service providers, there's clinicians, there's social workers, there's law enforcement officers that track those folks every day. They know where they are, they know where they live, they know who they hang out with, and believe it or not, there's often a web of support around them that that person might not participate in very directly, but there are people all the time trying to make things better. And I know we have really compassionate folks engaged in street outreach and trying to continually do that motivational interviewing, trying to get somebody engaged and thinking that they can participate in recovery. One of the nice things about Humboldt County, as bad as you might think it looks, that people are aware of what's going on and people are trying to help. So that isn't an answer to the stress that you experience and the sadness that you see, but there is help available for folks, and we do what we can to get it to them. This process of long-term engagement, it's relationship building often, but I hope that things work out for your son, and more people care than you probably know, and keep hoping.
On that note, I'd love to ask our panelists, you know, you are working on the front lines of people often who are in mental health crises. We are seeing a lot of stress, post-traumatic stress disorder with frontline responders to mental health crises. What do you do for yourselves, you know, to be able to help other people? Like, what do you do? How do you put your oxygen mask on and stay okay, you know?
Well,
go ahead, Gardner.
No, I was just going to say there's a lot of first responders, paramedics, fire have critical incident debriefing sessions. It's internal, it's part of the QI, quality improvement, and safety protocol and process. And just about every county in California. It's pretty much a statewide mandate. And having been through a lot of it myself, I was a paramedic for 17 years, oh my God, in San Francisco. That's where the action is, I guess, I don't know. Oh, yeah. But it really helps. It helps a lot. And it's, guess what? It's based on the same thing. You're sharing experiences, you're creating bonds, you're creating a relationship of wellness with other people with the same problems. And part of the process is the review and really figuring out you didn't do anything wrong. You know, you're suffering from this post-traumatic stress disorder, which will tear you up if you don't engage in that way.
So I'll add my little bit. So I think part of it is I do what I've always loved to do, which is walking, sewing, reading, so I don't give up the things I really like to do in my life. I have a hot tub, which I got like maybe 10, 11 years ago, and I did not realize, but the value of going out in my hot tub, and I kind of have a little odd iconic altar with Buddha and Jesus Christ and a turtle and all this stuff on there, and candles, and then I play nice, spa music, whatever. But just that 20 or 30 minutes every night allows me to debrief. I think the other thing I do a lot of is kind of self-talk. So I always say, and some of this, the people in the support group here, but we can't solve all problems. We can't control people, places, and things sometimes. The only thing we can control is how we react. So I remind myself about that when I try and, we try and fix stuff all the time. And sometimes the best thing to do is nothing. Just go get in your hot tub. So anyway, that's what I do.
Yeah, that's a good one. I agree. Hot water is great, especially with Epsom salts. Lots. I take morning walks before I start work, weather permitting, spend a fair amount of time in nature. Sometimes at the end of the day, I might just sit in my hammock chair in the backyard and just have some quiet time. Try and let all of the day's work kind of empty out of my head and just take in being alive and in life in the moment, having a little kind of sacred time like that. And I would also say probably focusing on nourishing my social connections. I lost a friend to suicide last year, and one of us in the group created a Facebook page memorializing her. And we are all in different places, but we were able to connect with each other and provide support to each other via that particular means. So while I tend to agree social media can be isolating, that is one good use for it. Going to a group of people who I know understand some of what I might be feeling, either in relationship to my grief over that person or just working with the work that I do and hearing the stories that I hear will get that.
I feel really fortunate to work with fantastic people who really are committed to, being available and present for one another in addition.
Leah had some additional things she wanted to add at one point. Would you like to do that now, Leah?
I got to remember what I was going to add. Oh, I know what it was. It was I was going to talk a little bit about intervention and prevention. And this is kind of a discussion I've been thinking about after reading the book I recommended. But you know how we use seatbelts in cars? Well, why not put something in cars that if the carbon monoxide gets too much, your engine will shut off? That seems pretty simple, right? That could save a lot of suicide deaths, hopefully, every year. The other thing is, I think just education about the importance. 80% of firearms are used by family members in either suicide or homicide. So educating the community that you may get a gun for self-protection, but if that gun isn't locked away and stored properly, someone could get it and end their life. And I just think that there's a lot we could do. Like if you have a heart attack in a hospital, and I mentioned this, I think, on the video, on the film, you get a lot of immediate care. But with mental health stuff, 83% of people have seen either a private practitioner or a behavioral specialist, clinician, or they've been in an ER for self-harm before they've taken their lives. So they have touched some way to get help. So I think we need to focus in more on follow-up for those people and not letting them sort of like slip through the cracks. So I just, I think we just need to think more about ways to intervene and prevent, and the community stuff is just one idea, a great idea. But also, we just need to think about other ways that we can help stem this tide. And, a lot of it's ACE scores. I mean, if you have 4 ACE scores on a checklist, you're 39% more likely to end your life with suicide. So just making sure our children are cared for and doing the best we can in our communities, which you guys are obviously here because you care. I mean, this is awesome. I mean, this is what we need, just people that step out of the box a little bit and show some care in our community. So thanks.
Thank you. The seatbelt analogy, I just want to say that one of my community members out in the Mattole, I interviewed also about suicide prevention. He made the point that back in the 70s, 80s, whenever it was we got seatbelts, no one wanted to wear one, right? But now they're standard in cars. And he had this analogy that, mental health services, crisis intervention services are kind of the same thing. Like, we don't get in car accidents very often, but when we do, we're glad we have them. So what I think we're doing right now as a community is we are equipping our community with that safety equipment that we so badly need. I want to thank my panelists really quick. Could we have a